My name is Vinca Petersen and I am showing my exhibition Me, Us and Dogs at Edel Assanti Gallery. In this exhibition I've brought together 4 constellations, you might say, of memories, but they're very loosely based around 4 different themes. The first, we could say, well, we can start anywhere, but the first is called Parco Nord, and it's sort of site-specific to a park that we used to stop in Bologna in Italy as travellers. And well, I mean, I travelled with groups of people putting on illegal raves, and we were always looking for places, kind of safe places to park up and to take a break, to breathe, to fix our trucks, and just to live our lives. And Parco Nord was a strange sort of place, almost autonomous, near the city of Bologna, but almost cut off by a motorway and flyovers that went all around the park. But there was a way in, and the local authorities didn't care about this park because it was a very rough, kind of unwanted piece of land. So they would park the travelling circuses up there in the winter, and we would kind of sneak in and like park nearby, and no one ever seemed to mind. So a couple of winters we parked up next to this circus, and our lives became kind of entwined. And these images are about that time and the feeling of that time. But as with all the pieces, there are elements, there aren't really any rules. I didn't set myself too many rules with them, so there are some much more abstract elements that may have come from other times and other moments. But with all the pieces, what I wanted to do was kind of let images that I've had in my mind come together as they wanted to, and often certain sets of images have this sort of underlying attraction that isn't really about the surface, not really about the image itself. It could be about what's in the image, or my memory, or sometimes false memories I have. But working with an archive a lot and seeing images on repeat, sometimes they sort of connect together in your mind. And this group, for example, dogs have been in the background and with us. They travelled with us, and I mean, I've had family dogs like many people do, but then when I lived on the road, we had dogs that almost lived in a pack around us, and they went everywhere with us, and they always kind of connected us with our sort of more animal, sort of wilder side, both physically because they ran around and were quite wild and were never kept on leads, for example, but also sort of subconsciously. And they kind of separated us from purely commercial sort of feelings at events, you know, because if you put on a big event and there were sort of animals running around, it kind of changed the feeling of the place, and you wouldn't really be allowed to do that in a normal kind of commercial context. I'm honouring them, you know, all these animals that for some reason loved us unconditionally and stayed with us. Yeah, so that's dogs, sight dogs. People were always fascinated in the homes that I had, because although you're living on the road and you're living kind of in very temporary circumstances a lot of the time. If you're a squatter, I was a squatter and I lived in alternative communities. But each one of these places was just as much my home as a more static house or permanent place to live. And so this is a kind of insight into these spaces that I made my home. But they're also a kind of another journey into memory and how memory kind of functions. And it's kind of weird, like this is sort of the interior of, I think, the 4th truck I had. And some things I really remember, like like the kettle, you know, you have this like deep connection with your kettle because you go to it 3 or 4 times a day, at least if you're me. But then also with all these things, I like the fact that it steps out of my world and my archive and maybe connects with other people and their homes and their experiences of home and growing and, you know, where we decide to settle and how we settle. The 4th board is, well, it's called Self-Portraits, but again, there's no real rules in this. And this board, I can't say so much about because for me it's full of questions, really. The question of why we are so interested in our own image. And as a photographer that works on film, you know, why did I take pictures of myself when I often wouldn't have seen the picture for 3 weeks or longer till I could develop the film? And most of the time you would get other people to take your portrait if you wanted a picture of yourself because you couldn't physically get far enough from the camera or you had to set it up on a timer. And so I thought, you know, I would start to photograph myself again. So most of these images are from sort of the 90s and early 2000s, but there is an image here which I took this summer. But I think the word I use when I talk about that kind of joy, it's very important to remember it's not the kind of syrupy kind of commercial joy that we're peddled. It's a sort of bone deep, subversive kind of joy. And that to me is much more powerful